Welcome back to the Poker Vlog. This is episode number 208. For this one, we're playing 5-10 at Bellagio, getting to some massive pots, and gets progressively more interesting as the video goes on, so be sure to stick around till the end. But a few announcements before we get into it. The first one is that I'm officially a brand ambassador for the World Poker Tour. I told you guys last episode that I'm going to be trying to give back as often as I can, and that starts out with the first meetup game that I'm doing with WPT. That's going to be at Choctaw in Oklahoma, May 12th. We're giving away two $3,800 Choctaw main event seats and two $1,500 WPT Prime passports. So the way you can win is by following the rules on my tweet about it. I'll have a link down below in the description box, but basically you comment on that tweet, retweet it, follow me on Twitter, and follow World Poker Tour on Twitter as well. And then May 4th through the 23rd, we're doing the Lodge Championship Series here at the Lodge. This is the live stream set behind me. I'm about to hop into 2550 and pretty nervous about it, but hopefully it'll go well. Anyway, I'm gonna be out here May 16th through the 23rd. I'm gonna be doing an official meetup game with Doug and Andrew. We'll be playing 2-5. We'll be hopping from table to table, and it should be a blast. So hope to see you guys out here as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We've got a little time off from the road, so we're on the strip to battle against some of Las Vegas's finest poker players at Bellagio. After taking some shots in big games in Texas, and those not quite going as hoped, I'm barely up on the year. I haven't quite recovered all the money that I've lost at the Lodge, but I'm on the comeback trail and playing with lots of focus. I make my way to the poker room and buy into a brand new 5-10 must-move game for $1,500, that's the max. We begin the session at 12:23 p.m. and are taking no prisoners. Nearly an hour goes by before we pick up Ace-King offsuit at the main table. The cutoff raises to 30. The button genuinely likes poker, but hates exchanging chips. For pictures of Ben Franklin at the end, he 3-bets to 100 in order to get one less of those Ben Franklin portraits later on. Against two late position players with wide ranges, we're not folding or calling. We cold 4-bet to 350. Neither opponent is too happy to see me get involved. Both players fold. It took a long time for us to find a decent spot, so even with this pot coming towards us, we're still stuck a bit. The good news is that the high cards have stopped ignoring us. We pick up pocket aces under the gun +1 just a few minutes later. The under the gun player calls 10. Hopefully he has plans to limp 3-bet. I raise to 40. The button is a viewer from Oakland. She calls with intentions of crushing my soul twice, once at the table, and then again when I have to make a video of it and share it with everyone on YouTube. Under the gun calls, we're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes 9-6 deuce all diamonds. You may have noticed, we don't have one of those. Under the gun checks, we can't let any free cards come out. I bet 90. It doesn't appear that either opponent has anything strong. They both fold. This one gets us back to the even mark. I show the viewer that she made a good laydown.
You don't have diamonds, Cole.
No, I know. I had to win at that.
I'm trying to be on your blog. That's why I'm here. Are you recording?
I am. I don't know if that one will make it or not, though.
It made it, just to warm you guys up for some big hands that are coming. 2 hands later, we pick up Ace-10 offsuit in the big blind. The cutoff raises to 30. The button calls, the small blind calls. We're getting 5-1 and call for 20 more. 4 of us are seeing the flop. It's 9-6 deuce with only 2 diamonds, very similar to the previous flop. We've got nothing, which is probably what everyone else has. We all check. The turn is the ace of diamonds, giving us top pair. The small blind checks. We'd likely have the best hand, but when the pre-flop raiser checks the flop, he could have plenty of aces in his range as well, with some of those being better than ours. I check to see what the cutoff wants to do. He checks. This action leads me to believe that he probably doesn't have us beat, but it doesn't completely rule out that possibility. The button also checks. There's no way that he has 2 pair or better either. The river is the deuce of hearts pairing the board. The small blind checks. It's extremely unlikely that he has anything and is checking a 3rd time after it's checked through on the previous streets. There isn't anyone for us to be too worried about. We bet 70 for value. Perhaps we can get a crying call from someone who has a worse ace or 9. Cutoff folds. He's the person who I was most concerned about. The button folds. The action's on the small blind. He thinks I may just be trying to steal this. He's contemplating whether or not to let his hand go or keep me honest. He calls. We show him that we have a real hand. We never see what the small blind has. He returns his cards face down to the dealer. It's another pot that isn't too large, but these are common situations in poker, so I wanted to go through some of them before we get into the good stuff. Here we've got Jack-9 suited on the button. This one's playable. We raised to 30. The big blind is a pro that I played with a handful of other times in Las Vegas. He calls, we're heads up in position, the flop comes Ace-Jack-7 rainbow, we've got middle pair. The big blind checks, There's a good chance that we have the best hand, all mixed in checking or betting to deny equity and keep control of the pot. I bet 30 this time. The big blind doesn't look like he wants to give up. He calls. We've got a hand with showdown value that we don't want to get blown off of, and the opponent has shown at least some interest, so we're not going to keep inflating this pot unless we improve. The turn is the 3 of hearts, not one that helps us in any way. The big blind checks, we stick with our plan and check back. The river is the jack of hearts, giving us trips. The big blind checks. I would have expected him to bet with a hand better than ours. We bet 80 for value. It'd be great if the opponent has an ace. The big blind has something better, or at least that's what he's trying to represent when he puts in a check raise to 360. It's unlikely that we're up against a full house given how this has been played. We could be up against a backdoor flush or air. After checking back the turn, I'll rarely have a hand better than trips. I call. The streak continues of a billion times in a row when I've gotten check raised on the river and the opponent has it. In this instance, it consists of ace-6 of hearts, good for the best possible flush.
Nice hand. Good river for you.
Our profit is gone, we're stuck, and add on for 400 shortly after to be in the game for 1900 total. Next we're dealt ace-9 of diamonds on the button. It's a straddle pot. The hijack raises to 60. This guy seems a little on edge after some hands haven't quite gone his way recently. I call to get in the mix, it's heads up and we're in position. The flop comes ace-6 deuce with 2 spades, the hijack checks. If my ace were better, I'd bet. My goal is to get 2 streets of value with my hand, so I check back here for a couple reasons. One is to potentially induce a bluff from my opponent, who I just saw got caught bluffing a few hands prior. The other is to instill some doubt in my opponent's mind that I have a hand as strong as I do, so that I can potentially get called by something like a small or medium pocket pair on the turn and or river. The turn is another 6, the hijack checks and looks like he's given up. It's tough to get value from someone who doesn't seem like they want anything to do with this pot. I make a small bet of 50 just to spice things up. The hijack check raises to 100. This doesn't make a ton of sense. I'm not sure what the opponent's trying to represent after checking twice and putting in this min raise. I call for 50 more. The river is the 4 of clubs, it's a blank. The hijack stops pretending like he has a strong hand that he doesn't have. He checks. If I thought there was a good chance that he's strong, I check back. I just don't think that's the case. I'm fairly certain that we've got him beat. I bet 130 to get a light call or maybe even induce another bluff attempt. For 30 seconds, the hijack thinks about whether or not to do something so wild that Joe Francis wouldn't even believe it. Instead, the hijack folds. We win it. We're still down. It's not much though, and the game is pretty good. 5 minutes later, we've got pocket 10s under the gun +1. Under the gun raises to 30. He's an older guy who limped in previously from under the gun, so I take his raise here more seriously than I ordinarily would against a random opponent. I call. The hijack is another pro at the table who I played with for years. She 3-bets to 210. It's a large sizing. Under the gun just flats. We can rule out him having aces or kings. The price I'm getting isn't all that great, and I started with less than 200 big blinds. I don't hate the idea of folding. I just don't want to do it. I call for 180 more, almost immediately regretting the situation that I put us in because we're never going to feel all that comfortable on the flop unless it comes 10-9 deuce rainbow. We've got the absolute nuts in a multi-way 3-bet pot that's already big for this game. Hold on tight, this is going to be a fun one. Under the gun checks. I check to the pre-flop aggressor. This isn't that great of a flop for her range, and it clearly is quite good for ours. I don't want her to check back. She doesn't. She bets 240. I love seeing opponents put money in the pot when we've got the best hand possible. It gets better as the under the gun player calls. With over 100 big blinds in the middle, we need to figure out the optimal way to go about this. If we call and slow play, the hijack will likely be very suspicious that she's beat, with 2 opponents calling a flop bet. She may even check back the turn with a hand as good as aces. We won't want any overcards to come out because we won't know which ones will potentially give our opponents a straight or a set, or will freeze the action. It can't be bad to throw in a check raise right now. I make it 700. This sizing completely handcuffs the hijack. If she has any overpair, she's going to hate the situation that she's in. It's 460 more for her to call, but she won't be calling. I only have 770 behind, so I anticipate the hijack folding or jamming. She's having a difficult time determining what to do. She must have an overpair of some sort. If she has aces or kings, I'd expect her to get it in since I may play this the same way up to this point with queens or jacks. After almost a minute, the hijack makes a disciplined laydown. If we were heads up, she might have called. The under the gun player picks up the slack. He calls for 460 more and has our remaining 770 covered. With 3/4 of the 10s accounted for, I imagine he's going to show up with queens or jacks a lot of the time. A low turn would be great. The dealer puts out the 7 of hearts, completing an unlikely straight draw. Under the gun checks. We only have one option, and that's to rip it. We go all in for about 1/3 of a pot-sized bet. Under the gun is getting 4-1 on a call. If he has queens or jacks, like we suspect, He'll only have 2 outs. There's no snap call. I'm surprised that the opponent hadn't already planned out what he'd do if he faced what was almost an inevitable shove by me. I'm rooting for a call. After 30 seconds goes by, Under the Gun puts in a 1K yellow chip. We're playing almost a $4,000 pot with the second nuts and 1 card to go. The river is the 6 of hearts, putting 4 to the straight out there. I don't exactly love it, but I'm not too distraught because I don't see how the opponent would have an 8. I turn over top set. You're not going to believe what Under the Gun has, or maybe you would. We never actually get to see what he called us with, as he turns his cards in face down. We get a huge double up, plus an extra several hundred from the hijack. Just like that, we go from being down to being up almost $2,000. It's nice to acquire a yellow chip and watch the remaining orange and black chips come our direction as well. We've got the biggest stack at the table, and we're not finished. 2.5 hours into the session, we've got 5-4 suited in the big blind. The player Under the Gun raises to 30. The small blind calls. I'm getting a price I like with a hand that has plenty of potential. We call for 20 more, closing the action. There are 3 of us seeing the flop. The dealer puts out 7-5-3 with 2 clubs and a spade. We've got middle pair, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw. Small blind checks. I check. Under the Gun bets 50. This won't be a great flop for his Under the Gun opening range. It's great for our big blind calling range though. We can have a straight, all the sets, and some 2-pair hands. Small blind calls. Calling and raising are both good options. Raising allows us to win it right now though. I bump it up to 220. The Under the Gun player isn't ready to jump ship just yet. He calls for 170 more. The small blind isn't feeling it. He folds. It's down to heads up. It's tough to know exactly what the opponent has. I'm guessing a flush draw or an overpair. The turn is the 5 of diamonds, giving us trips. A better turn couldn't have been dealt. That's one of the benefits of check raising as a bluff. Sometimes you get there. The new goal is to extract as much value as possible. I bet 430. It's a healthy sizing. Under the Gun calls. I still put him on the same type of hands, but I hope that he has an overpair more than a flush draw because the river is the 8 of hearts. It's another card that's better for my range, although in reality, it doesn't change much unless the opponent somehow has pocket 8s. Under the Gun only has 800 left in his stack. I consider checking to induce a bluff from a missed club draw, but it'll get checked back too regularly. I jam to get calls from premium pocket pairs or a non-believer. Under the Gun immediately folds. He's flustered and snap picks up. We're having a great day with everything working out about as well as possible. It's another big pot that we get to rake in. We're up almost 2,700 on the session. Later on, we're dealt 6-5 of diamonds on the button. Under the Gun raises to 30. There's the same player who 3-bet earlier when we flopped the set of 10s. I call. We're heads up in position. The flop comes King Jack 3, all diamonds. We flop a flush. Under the Gun knows that having 2 Broadway cards out there will typically be better for her. She bets 30 again. I'm debating whether or not to call or raise. I call since we're in position and can ensure that it won't get checked through on the turn. The dealer puts out the 10 of hearts. Maybe Under the Gun has a 2-pair better hand. She puts in a big bet of 120. This is interesting. For one thing, I'm not 100% sure that we've got the best hand. We've played this passively so far. Our hand is way under-repped. Under the Gun could be completely bluffing, thinking that we've got a diamond draw or that we're relatively weak. If that's the case, I want her to keep firing for large amounts. I call again. We're just lying in the weeds, hoping that no more diamonds come out and the board won't pair. We get our wish. The river is the 8 of spades. It's a complete blank. Under the Gun isn't very confident. She slows down and checks. Maybe she's trapping, or maybe she has a hand with plenty of value like a straight, set, 2-pair, or top, and it's giving me an opportunity to bluff if she thinks that we could have a missed ace-high flush draw. I bet 400 to make it look like I'm trying to buy it. Under the Gun doesn't think for too long before folding. We win one more fun one. Since losing trip jacks, we've been on a roll. Here we've got ace-9 offsuit on the button. Under the Gun +1 limps in for 10. When you're first in the pot, you really don't want to limp in almost ever, aside from when you're in the small blind. When I see this, I go into attack mode. I raise to 40 to isolate someone who I've immediately marked in my head as a recreational player. Under the Gun +1 calls for 30 more. We're heads up. The flop comes Queen 7-3 with 2 spades. The opponent checks. I'll mix in checking or betting. I check with ace high since it has value and I'd like to see it turn to possibly pick up a flush draw. The dealer puts out another queen. Under the Gun +1 senses weakness and bets 40. I actually didn't mind seeing the queen on the turn because it makes it less likely that the opponent flopped a pair. I'm suspicious that he could be bluffing with air. He took the same line against me in another pot and I folded. He's betting more frequently in situations than he's likely to have it. I call to see what develops. The river is the ace of diamonds. We drill top pair. We may have to be worried about trip queens after all because Under the Gun +1 bets 100. I didn't call the turn to make top pair and fold. I call again here. We were ahead the entire way. The opponent shows that he has ace-6 offsuit. He kind of bluffed the turn Then we both got there on the river, but it's confirmed that our 9-high kicker plays. Under the gun +1 gets a little punished for playing too wide of a range. He shouldn't really be playing offsuit aces below ace-10 from early position, and in some games, you won't want to play any offsuit ace aside from ace-queen and ace-king from under the gun and under the gun +1. If he were suited, he could have justifiably raised pre-flop with pretty much any ace. More pros are filtering into the game, and we look down at queen-9 suited in the big blind. Under the gun +1 raises to 30. He's a good European pro. I call for 20 more, we're heads up out of position, the flop comes queen-8 deuce with 2 spades, we've got top pair and a weak backdoor straight draw. We check, under the gun +1 goes with a large sizing and bets 50. We won't be putting in a check raise here, we call. I'm already worried that the opponent is going to fire for progressively larger amounts and really put us to the test. The turn is the 9 of hearts giving us 2 pair, but Jack 10 gets there, and there's another flush draw to be worried about. I check, the opponent is relentless, he bets 120. The board could only get worse for us from here. We don't want to allow the under the gun +1 player to see a river card without putting more money in when we likely have the best hand. I raised to 400. Halfway wanting a fold because a lot of rivers will make us incredibly uncomfortable, including any hearts, any spades that don't pair the board, 10s, jacks, kings and aces. If we get raised, I also won't be feeling too confident. Luckily the opponent folds. That's the last big hand that we play. The game is getting tougher and tougher as more good players are replacing the seats of the recreational players. It's time to book a solid win. Played for 4.5 hours. I won 25.70, just ran really good. Had the huge pot with the set of 10s. That was awesome. But my favorite hand was actually with the 5-4 suited when I check raised as a bluff or a semi-bluff and then turned trips. That was pretty sweet, but unfortunately couldn't stack the guy. Still pretty awesome time, and I've done really well since Monster Meetup Week. I ended up losing 15,000 during that week in January. I think at the low point during that week, I was stuck 46,000, but 33,000 of that portion was from the 100-200 uncapped game, and then I got 31,000 of that back within that session. So I've kind of recovered like 42 or 43,000 since that low point, which is pretty awesome. So I'm gonna try and hopefully continue to run good, but just enjoying playing poker right now, and yeah, looking forward to playing some higher stakes games, but 510 is where I feel the most comfortable, at least for now. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe button because it helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. Don't forget to enter that Twitter competition that we're doing for giving away the 2 WPT main event seats to the $3,800 Choctaw event. And then we're giving away the 2 $1,500 WPT Prime passports as well. And hopefully I'll see you at Choctaw May 12th. We're doing the meetup game there, and then I'll be firing in a handful of tournaments, including the main event from May 10th to the 16th, and then May 16th to the 23rd. I'm coming out here back at the Lodge for the Lodge Championship Series. We're doing a meetup game with Doug, Andrew, and me May 22nd. So a lot of stuff going on in May. Super excited for it. Hope you guys are all doing well. Good luck with the tables, and I'll see you next time.